Namgungia, the largest martial arts sect, surpassed Theamifangio and led the martial arts community. It was a high-level clan that produced many rankers and high rankers, elevating Namgungia to glory. After returning to Namgungia, Namgunhoon left behind all the events that had occurred on the 11th floor with Namgung Jinwoon. Jinwoon, sipping tea, informed Namgunhoon that Olympus was preparing for the Gigan Tomachia battle. They had found Hephaestus, but failed to recruit him due to Kim YuWon. He had become a thorn in their side. Jinwoon speculated that Asgarda would eventually hear about this. As for Kim YuWon, the rising star was about to face a major storm. At the same time, YuWon continued to sweep through the tower's floors with her strength. Players watched in astonishment as she smashed all the shields on the arena floor. YuWon quickly defeated 1,000 targets, something she was confident about, but it was also her first time using Fanho to do so. YuWon had now surpassed the 19th floor challenge and received 50,000 points, with her strength, stamina, and mental power each increased by 1 point. However, YuWon felt regretful. The challenge criterion was to defeat 100 targets, and she had done 10 times that amount. But the rewards were too few. After completing the challenge, YuWon hurriedly left, believing she needed to aim for floors 20 and above for better rewards. While those floors were more difficult, the rewards were more reasonable. During this time, YuWon decided to temporarily stop climbing the tower. It was now the opportune moment to increase her demonic power to the 3rd stage, and the most effective way to do so was by consuming Danduk, priced at 1 million points. This type of elixir was only created every 3 years in the martial world, and the martial arts convention was the place to obtain it. It was time for YuWon to attend the martial arts convention. One day before the martial arts convention began, on the 10th floor of the martial world, people from all over gathered to participate. Outsiders believed that Namgunhoon would be the winner of this martial arts convention. Suddenly, the sound of hurried footsteps approached, and a young man arrived, panting, to announce the hot news about the upcoming martial arts convention. Kim YuWon would also participate in another location on the 10th floor. YuWon's repeated refusal to engage with all the proactive factions seeking her was met with surprise. The head of the 12th faction on land, a ranker from the Bilut lineage, was extremely shocked when YuWon rejected him. Despite being rejected by YuWon, he still didn't want to give up and suggested discussing matters indoors. Right at that moment, Shuriel appeared, mocking Bilut with a few words before introducing himself from the Joyeon faction. YuWon's attitude toward Shuriel made him quite uncomfortable, but he still tried to force a smile and handed YuWon a business card, saying that the Joyeon faction always reserved a spot for her. YuWon remained indifferent, stating that even if he gave her something like that, she wouldn't contact him. Another character appeared, snatching the business card from Shuriel's hand. It was Hargan. He winked at YuWon and asked her why she hadn't seen him for so long. When Hargan appeared, YuWon remained stubborn, suggesting he leave too, which shattered Hargan's heart. YuWon turned to him and whispered to just go along with it, and immediately shut the door in front of the factions with bloodthirsty eyes. Just as YuWon stepped inside, there was a knocking on the door. YuWon was quite accustomed to this and told Hargan not to worry. If they were really urgent, they would have broken down the door by now. After a few unrelated stories, Hargan suddenly asked YuWon if she had caused a huge uproar, preventing Hephaestus from being captured. Even if he were to be ignored, Hargan emphasized that she must know who his father was. He had almost all the information here. When he heard the news, he thought she was insane. What Hargan wanted to know now was why YuWon had done that and turned Olympus into an enemy. Hargan warned YuWon that she was not being careful. Those who were seizing opportunities were under Hera, possibly even heirs. The relationship between Ares and Hera wasn't good. YuWon cut Hargan off, wanting to ask him if he knew about these things. According to what Hargan knew, Zeus was focusing on attacking the top floor of the tower. He had let go of Olympus for a long time, so YuWon's face suddenly became tense. The top floor of the tower had never been surpassed, hence it was called that way. That was also why players reaching the 100th floor were called rankers. YuWon was even more curious, not knowing how they would react when they learned about the existence of Tran. a level higher than the 100th floor. Hargan continued to caution YuWon to be careful, because the person she saved was a criminal. YuWon was surprised that even Hargan considered his uncle a criminal. Then she asked Hargan if he wanted to go somewhere with her, to the place Hargan had just called the lair of criminals. At that moment, Vulcaro was still engrossed in weapon forging. He vaguely heard news from other players that YuWon was continuing to climb higher floors. Vulcaro thought about YuWon and immediately appeared. He wondered why YuWon had brought Hargan along. He quickly introduced himself to Vulcaro, who, upon hearing the name, knew Hargan was one of the children of his uncle. Hargan smirked and told Vulcaro not to call him a troublesome younger brother. Vulcaro still maintained an unpleasant attitude towards Hargan, questioning how he could address Hargan so intimately while tensions between them were so high. Then Vulcaro expressed caution toward Hargan, suspecting why he had come. Hargan quickly explained to him how he had the strength to capture Vulcaro and that he had come here just to meet him. Vulcaro couldn't hide his expression of astonishment. He was wondering why Hargan himself had come to meet him. When Hargan explained, Vulcaro was even more amazed. Hargan told him that he knew Olympus couldn't be trusted. Since he was born, he had heard that his older brother was a notorious criminal, but he had also heard that his friend had saved his brother here and had helped him learn a lot. So he wanted to meet Vulcaro in person and evaluate him based on his own feelings. Looking at Hargan's current demeanor and presence, Vulcaro felt increasingly similar to Zeus. Vulcaro's guard against Hargan gradually loosened. He asked Hargan how he felt. After just a few conversations with Vulcaro, Hargan couldn't be sure what kind of person he was. Hargan continued to speak to Vulcaro, saying he knew he wasn't making weapons anymore, but there were still tons of weapons made by him in Olympus. However, Hargan was only interested in knowing the time. Vulcaro stopped forging weapons and contemplated for a moment. He recounted to Hargan that after the battle with the giants, he had ceased weapon forging. The giants, a race ruled by their innate strength and robust physique, had been accused by some for their intimidating power. Yet, it was thanks to them that Olympus had reached its current position. Therefore, Olympus had once stood by them. The giants considered Olympus their ally, even their friend. Vulcaro, too, considered them his friends. However, those friends were pierced through the heart by weapons he had forged. The battle between the giants, named after Zeus and instigated by Olympus when the giants were excluded, had a very simple reason behind it: politics. Public reaction to Olympus wasn't favorable, and now Olympus had exclusive control, like the giants. All giants, Olympus and rankers from various guilds fought each other for territory, making the battle fierce and terrifying. The sound of swords clashing reverberated throughout the heavens like thunder, and the ground inside the tower was stained with the blood of countless individuals. Vulcaro's giant friends all sacrificed themselves to increase Olympus's influence and erase its loss of credibility. When Vulcaro recounted these events to Hargan, he couldn't keep calm. Immediately, thoughts raced through his mind. Olympus was planning another war. Hargan's emotions now were perhaps best understood by Vulcaro. Vulcaro didn't force Hargan to do anything, but he maintained his stance of fighting against Olympus. Then he called YuWon's name and asked her to go into the warehouse with him. He had something for her to do. YuWon glanced at Hargan. Perhaps Vulcaro requested her presence in the warehouse to give Hargan more time to think. Hargan relaxed his hand from a loose grip to a clenched fist. Vulcaro walked ahead, and YuWon followed. Vulcaro unexpectedly praised Hargan in front of YuWon. He also understood why YuWon had brought Hargan to meet him. Then he asked YuWon if she intended to continue with him. YuWon sighed. She wasn't sure anymore, but she might consider it. It's rare for someone to praise others like Vulcaro did, praising Hargan in front of her. In Vulcaro's eyes, Hargan was still in his volatile youth, so it was hard to predict the path he would choose. Hence, Vulcaro had no other choice but to continue observing. Vulcaro led YuWon to a sealed door, unlocking it slowly. He informed her that he had completed what she had requested, but there were some complications during the forging process. Vulcaro no longer had faith in his own skills. He named YuWon's weapon Kaini and helped her name it as well. YuWon was surprised. In a previous life, Vulcaro had also named Hades' helmet Kaini. It was unexpected that he chose the same name for a completely different item. Vulcaro didn't doubt YuWon's abilities. From the first floor, she had to fight a ranker. However, the issue wasn't whether she was strong enough, but whether she was worthy. He wanted to know if YuWon could handle this. When YuWon put on the glove, Vulcaro suddenly disappeared from her sight. Instead, a giant eye appeared before her, asking her who she was. YuWon realized this was Kaini's challenge. She answered the eye's question, but then it spoke of unsettling things from another time. YuWon began to feel perplexed. Was it referring to her from a previous timeline? She hastily asked who or what it was, and the eye replied, "I am the Silent Eye." YuWon felt disheartened. Kaini's personality was created from divine black crystal, and even the 3 divine artifacts of Olympus held little information. They vanished during the invasion by the external gods. All YuWon knew was from Kronos in the past, who mentioned it was Hades' helmet. Now Kaini was a glove. She wondered if it was sealed within the black crystal, or if it was the crystal itself. YuWon decided to seize this opportunity to learn Kaini's true power. Suddenly, Trum Chamhoi was mentioned, and it immediately jolted her awake. Not only that, but it also began to scream. YuWon sensed a massive mana density, a colossal attribute of darkness that could corrode her body. She wanted to dodge, but it seemed too late. She quickly used Thanho to try to contain the expanding Trum Chamhoi. The current ratio had risen to 41.29%, and it was still increasing rapidly. YuWon was sure this egg was from the realm of the external gods. If that was the case, it might know where they came from. She looked up and asked the eye if it knew what this egg was, but it only replied with 2 words, "Observe," and then disappeared. Just then, a powerful attack emerged. Vulcaro and his hammer stood in front of YuWon. He worriedly asked if she was okay, as a strange mana force had disturbed her. Before YuWon could reply, she was struck on the head by Vulcaro's hammer, leaving her mind numb and speechless. He inquired how she felt after using Kaini. YuWon hesitantly told him that it felt like she wasn't wearing anything, but her mind was preoccupied with something else. She looked at the glove she was wearing, sensing a great secret hidden behind it. YuWon was more determined than ever to collect the remaining 12 pieces to uncover the truth. Her next goal was to find the piece of the trident. Hargan was startled to see Vulcaro and YuWon return, asking what had happened as the place had just experienced a soul-shaking event. Vulcaro handed Hargan his hammer and suggested he ask YuWon, indicating that he had only nudged him. Hargan's eyes were immediately drawn to YuWon's glove, and he hurriedly approached her, asking why Vulcaro had spoken like that. YuWon reassured Hargan that there was nothing to worry about, and then inquired if he had finished his thinking. Hargan still couldn't come to a conclusion. This matter was too complex. He thought he should meet with Apollo and Artemis first. YuWon understood. If Hargan had said that, it meant he wanted to know more about the Jigen Tomachia battle. He would handle this matter more cautiously. Most of all, Hargan wanted to focus temporarily on the martial arts convention. He needed to spread his name to gain more power within Olympus. Unlike heirs, he wanted to attract people to his side by constantly proving his worth. Moreover, in this martial arts convention, there were many more skilled participants than before, and Hargan had heard that famous rankers would come to watch. He couldn't miss such a grand stage. Afterward, Hargan revealed to YuWon a dangerous secret. An outstanding person would also be coming, the vice-sect master of Themefangio. YuWon looked at Hargan strangely. Wasn't he that person? Indeed, he was, and this revelation shocked Hargan. Continuing, Hargan mentioned that if this news leaked, YuWon's value would continue to soar. Although YuWon knew this, she had no intention of joining any faction. Hargan understood her character well, but other factions might think differently. He was eagerly looking forward to the next day, the opening ceremony of the martial arts convention. From early morning, people from all over had poured in to witness the spectacular matches. The information about the preliminary round was immediately announced. 10 random players would step onto the grand martial arts stage. Only the last one remaining would be eligible to participate in the main martial arts event. Yang Wonil from Thoang Kieman had just appeared and attracted everyone's attention. He was confident he had reached the 18th floor, considering it quite high since only those who hadn't reached the 25th floor were allowed to participate. Among the participants, he was sure he would secure a high position to elevate the reputation of his sect and gain favor from the sect leader. YuWon stood in the crowd, immediately recognizing him as the one who had invited her to the sect on the 10th floor. The bracket of 10 random players was announced, and Yang Wonil's triumphant expression quickly vanished. He hadn't expected to be placed in the same group as YuWon. As the preliminary round began, Yang Wonil immediately attacked YuWon, seeking revenge for old debts. But with his strength, he couldn't become YuWon's opponent. She didn't even bother drawing her sword, instead dodging his attacks and delivering a strong blow to his chin, causing him to fall flat on the ground. YuWon stood confidently before her opponents, declaring that she didn't care if they attacked one by one or all at once. They should quickly end this round. If they didn't, she would attack. After her declaration, they still didn't move, so YuWon had to take matters into her own hands. She swiftly defeated her opponents on the field, even playing with them like children learning to fight. The results were quickly announced. YuWon advanced to the main arena, with Hargan following suit in the next round. YuWon observed Hargan silently, realizing that Hargan's combat prowess had developed significantly, surpassing YuWon by a large margin. Hargan's rapid progress in skill and potential was almost unbelievable, placing him on par with higher-tier players. Moreover, Hargan possessed mana mastery akin to controlling lightning, with skills and appearance resembling Zeus. While YuWon was contemplating Hargan, she coincidentally encountered Yang Wonil, who looked displeased and pointedly stared at YuWon. At that moment, someone stepped forward and apologized to YuWon on Yang Wonil's behalf for his rude behavior. YuWon found this person's appearance strange and cautiously inquired about his intentions. He introduced himself as Moonso-bark, the leader of the Thoang Kieman sect, expressing his hope for YuWon to collaborate with his sect. However, YuWon immediately declined, showing no interest in his proposal. Despite YuWon's rejection, Moonso-bark persisted and revealed another secret. Thoang Kieman was not just a sect, but a martial arts school. Although they could be part of the martial arts community, they were originally a sect. Moonso-bark continued to try to persuade YuWon, but she remained resolute in her refusal. Then he recounted to YuWon the glorious history of Thoang Kieman, mentioning that although the sect had weakened somewhat, it was the first to carry on the traditions of the martial arts world. YuWon listened silently, realizing that this sect was not widely known, and So-bark was perhaps the only ranker within it. Feeling that it was a waste of time, YuWon wanted to leave. So-bark then placed his hand on YuWon's shoulder, his demeanor changing from jovial to dangerous as he spoke to YuWon, making it clear that this was not an invitation. YuWon looked at him, sensing that someone would inevitably try to recruit her sooner or later, but So-bark's behavior felt extremely strange to her. YuWon calmly reminded So-bark that he knew what would happen if a ranker caused trouble at the tournament, mentioning Namgunjia. This seemed to agitate So-bark further, who suggested that YuWon's arrogance stemmed from having Namgunjia's support. However, YuWon expressed disdain for So-bark's behavior. So-bark, realizing that YuWon understood his power, changed his approach again, insisting that he only wanted to ally with her and expressing confidence that she would understand the benefits of joining Thoang Kieman. Before So-bark could finish, YuWon interrupted him, firmly rejecting his offer once more. Despite So-bark's persistence, YuWon remained steadfast in her refusal. Frustrated, So-bark tried to physically intimidate YuWon by pushing her back and drawing his sword to threaten her. However, he knew it wouldn't be easy to force her, especially with the lively tournament going on. Feeling the pressure to conclude the matter quickly, he reconsidered his approach, realizing that his punishment couldn't be prolonged. As So-bark pondered his next move, YuWon reiterated her lack of trust in Namgunjia and her belief in herself. Sensing the tense situation, So-bark quickly backed off and sheathed his sword. YuWon stood her ground, prepared to face whatever consequences may come, while So-bark, acknowledging YuWon's formidable skills, reluctantly accepted the punishment of having her join Thoang Kieman. With a hand still on YuWon's shoulder, Sobark contemplated his next actions, eager to bring this encounter to an end. Just then, YuWon surprised everyone by speaking up. Actually, I believe something. A familiar voice from behind Sobark chimed in. I was wondering where you were. What are you doing here? It was Pung Bet Kim, the vice sect master of Theme Ephangio. Sobark was astonished to learn that YuWon was actually the vice sect master of Theme Ephangio. Confused and troubled, he realized that in his memory, there was only one place in the martial arts world where the term sect master was used, and the person standing before him was none other than the vice sect master of Theme Ephangio. As Sobark began to feel fear, he knew that if a fight were to break out, he would surely lose, and it would only lead to enmity with Theme Ephangio. Reluctantly, he apologized to YuWon and quickly left. Once Sobark left, YuWon immediately questioned Baek Kim about who had spread the rumor that the vice sect master of Theme Ephangio was participating in the tournament. Baek Kim's laughter broke the tense atmosphere, and YuWon then instructed him to investigate and handle the matter appropriately, hinting that Jujijia, the supporter of the head of the Thuong Kiman sect, should also be looked into. Baek Kim mentioned he had dinner plans with Namgungjia after the tournament, where he would discuss YuWon's instructions. YuWon then entered a room where Mu-jin was waiting. Mu-jin poured her a drink, but YuWon sensed something was off. The mana of Thyma was flowing into her cup along with the tea, making it feel heavy, as if a waterfall was cascading into it. YuWon realized this might be some kind of test. As the tea continued to overflow and cracks appeared in the cup, YuWon reminded herself to remain calm and prevent it from breaking. Meanwhile, Kaine's mana leaked out, perhaps reacting to YuWon's emotions. Observing YuWon's current state, Mu-jin made small talk, hinting that the tournament's grand scale was due to its rewards. YuWon then asked Mu-jin why he personally came here. Mu-jin explained that he was here to recruit new disciples and expand their influence. YuWon expressed her concern and reiterated her lack of interest in being vice sect master or being tied down to any group. She warned Mu-jin that if she were forced into the role, it would cause backlash from the disciples. However, Mu-jin assured her that no one could oppose her will. YuWon intentionally provoked Mu-jin by suggesting that she might destroy Theme Ephangio. Mu-jin, seemingly unfazed, accepted the possibility of facing difficulties alongside YuWon. His calm demeanor puzzled YuWon further. She questioned why he was so easily following her lead. Mu-jin seemed to understand YuWon's thoughts and simply told her that if she didn't understand, she should remember one thing. Nothing else mattered except for one thing. Then, in a solemn tone, Mu-jin announced to YuWon, Vice Sect Master Kim YuWon, from now on, you are Theme Ephangio. Elsewhere, the martial arts sect leaders were gathering to discuss this year's Grand Martial Arts Tournament. When the conversation turned to the name Kim YuWon, Sobark's expression suddenly changed. He revealed a secret. Kim YuWon is the deputy sect leader of Theme Ephangio. This discovery left everyone in the meeting in utter dismay. Sobark continued to explain that the ranker of Theme Ephangio had called Kim YuWon the deputy sect leader and wanted to welcome her. But Kim YuWon had refused and warned him not to approach her with such hostile intentions. From Sobark's account, those present, who already harbored resentment toward Theme Ephangio, now felt an even greater aversion to the sect. Sobark understood that within the martial alliance, Theme Ephangio was considered a threatening force to power. Hence, his goal was to make everyone here loathe Theme Ephangio even more, especially Kim YuWon. After the meeting, some sect leaders began to devise a plan to ensure Kim YuWon couldn't emerge as the victor in the tournament. In a discussion, one sect leader proposed an idea. During the final round, they could change the rules to a public trial, which would help end the competition more quickly. 2 days later, Hargan asked Kim YuWon about the sudden postponement of the final round and the change in the rules of competition. Hargan felt that the rule change was advantageous as it would help expedite the tournament. Although YuWon found the change confusing, she agreed that it might make the competition proceed more swiftly. Meanwhile, at the Grand Martial Arts Tournament, Hargan and YuWon drew everyone's attention. Hargan became more enthusiastic, but YuWon quietly observed him. At that moment, Nam Dong-hoon appeared and inquired about the battle on the 11th floor. Hargan was astonished upon hearing about this battle and continued to introduce himself as the great successor of Olympus. Nam Dong-hoon looked towards YuWon, who had overheard the conversation among the other sect leaders and knew that YuWon was the deputy sect leader of Theme Fangio. In response to Nam Dong-hoon's reaction, YuWon expressed surprise and asked if Theme Fangio had violated any laws. She criticized the use of deceitful tactics and emphasized that no one should be expelled just because they weren't part of the martial alliance. At that moment, a member of the noble sect Zujijia, Jin Qian, stepped forward. He calmly said to Nam Dong-hoon, "If you're afraid, then leave." Nam Dong-hoon felt suspicious about Jin Qian's sudden bloodlust, suspecting it was ordered by his family. The fact that the second-ranked family in the martial world behaved in such a manner meant they had succeeded in rallying most of the sects to their side. Nam Dong-hoon found it hard to believe that both adults and children were conspiring together in such a despicable manner. However, he was certain that whatever they did, YuWon would crush them. Sensing Nam Dong-hoon's thoughts, YuWon looked at him, seemingly understanding his unspoken message. Nam Dong-hoon didn't explicitly tell YuWon anything, just reminding her to be cautious before leaving. Meanwhile, Hargan continued to wonder about Nam Dong-hoon's cautious warning. However, before he could dwell on it further, the announcement to enter the arena sounded. As YuWon stepped inside, she noticed the hostile gazes directed at her and was approached by Hargan, who warned her to be careful and advised her not to let anyone else win. YuWon understood his message and assured him she would do her best. Elsewhere, the sect leaders discussed strategies to deal with YuWon and Thime Fangio. Unbeknownst to them, Jin Woon of Namgungya overheard their entire conversation. He believed that they needed a reform, as the martial world had become a place where one's words were more important than sword skills. Although ranked second, someone as corrupt as Jin Qian could wield more power than the top sects. Jin Woon decided to use the tournament as leverage for change. Amidst their confusion, Mujin entered, warning Sobark against drawing his sword, which he promptly obeyed. Mujin's calm demeanor contrasted with the rest's anxiety as he speculated about the outcome of the tournament. He expressed satisfaction with their discontent and arrogantly announced that their carefully laid plans would be destroyed. At that moment, YuWon was locked in combat on the arena floor. Sharp swords from her opponents emanated a volatile energy, thrusting towards her. YuWon swiftly leaned to the side, constantly rotating her body to defend against the incoming attacks. The opponent's swordsmanship, known as sword chi in the martial world, was formidable. In this world, those who could wield such skills were highly skilled indeed. Now, they were relentless in their assault on YuWon, a prominent figure in the martial world. Suddenly, another person rushed in, wielding a spear towards YuWon. She quickly used her sword to block, pushing both herself and her opponent back. Addressing them, YuWon questioned, "Are you targeting only me, or is it just my imagination?" From within, Jin Qian stepped forward, speaking on behalf of those present on the field. He assured YuWon not to be troubled, as Theme Fangio had long been an enemy of the martial alliance. Jin Qian's appearance made YuWon realize the reason behind the changes in the tournament rules. It was all because of Thime Fangio, the martial world's enemy. Despite being unsure who had devised this plan, YuWon found it simple yet effective. In a battle involving thousands, it was inevitable for groups to form and target the most skilled individuals. YuWon was increasingly intrigued, praising the planner's ingenuity. However, she lamented that she was the one they wanted to eliminate. Remaining composed, YuWon told Jin Qian there was no need for her to be troubled, as they were merely insignificant. Then, she activated her ancient sword skill to counter their attacks. However, the effectiveness of her technique was diminished by the opponent's teamwork. YuWon concealed her mana to outwit the rankers, ensuring they didn't discover her ability to reverse time. Observing YuWon's sword in hand, Jin Qian understood why she wielded such influence. To create a large-scale sword key, she needed at least 60 ancient swords. However, Jin Qian still couldn't believe YuWon was as powerful as rumored. He was confident that together, they could defeat her. Jin Qian signaled everyone to attack YuWon collectively. Just then, Hargan appeared and dispersed the attackers from the arena. He stood before YuWon, loudly reprimanding the assailants for their disgraceful behavior. YuWon was equally surprised by Hargan's sudden appearance. Jinqian, unimpressed by Hargan's intervention, insulted him. Hargan retaliated, mocking Jinqian for his arrogance. Enraged, Jinqian attempted to strike Hargan, but his attack was effortlessly repelled. Hargan continued to provoke Jinqian, eventually landing a powerful blow to his abdomen. Jinqian, the son of Zeus, was astonished by Hargan's audacity. In a fit of rage, Jinqian ordered his allies to target YuWon while he dealt with Hargan. However, Hargan swiftly evaded Jinqian's attacks, inflicting severe pain on him. Jinqian finally spoke, questioning why Olympus and Kim YuWon were enemies. Hargan was surprised by Jinqian's knowledge of this matter. In 3 seconds, due to Jinqian's unintentional words, Hargan speculated that YuWon might have guessed that Zhuge and Olympus had allied to eliminate her. The more Hargan thought about it, the more disgusted he felt, wondering how despicable they could be. Hargan continued relentlessly attacking Jinqian, rendering him unable to react to Hargan's strikes. Jinqian's wooden staff was partially burnt by Hargan's attacks, leaving him bewildered. Despite Jinqian's belief in his genius and leadership, he found himself unable to defeat Hargan. Jinqian's dreams were dashed as Hargan easily overpowered him, leaving him weak and vulnerable. Hargan scorned Jinqian, stating that if he hadn't interfered, Jinqian might have defeated YuWon on his own. Jinqian, struggling to defend himself, was overwhelmed by Hargan's assault. Eventually, he surrendered, acknowledging Hargan's superiority. The other members of Jinqian's faction quickly followed suit, abandoning their weapons and fleeing the arena, leaving only YuWon and Hargan to face each other. Before their battle commenced, YuWon wanted to ask Hargan 2 questions. She inquired if he felt any regret for going against Olympus. Hargan hastily replied, affirming that he knew the consequences of his actions and harbored no regrets. Then, he urged YuWon to ask her next question before engaging in combat. Recalling their past encounters, YuWon reminded Hargan of the time she had defeated him with a single punch, causing him to momentarily lose consciousness. She questioned how he could forget such an event, which marked the first time he had been defeated by someone other than a ranker. Hargan's gaze fell upon YuWon's sword, noticing she now wielded a different one, not in its legendary state. This revelation stirred his excitement, as he believed YuWon must unleash all her hidden powers in their battle. Their elite-level confrontation intensified, with YuWon using her sword to block Hargan's punches. Each strike created immense pressure, causing the arena to tremble. The atmosphere crackled with electricity and YuWon's mana, making it difficult for spectators to discern the unfolding events. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the arena, Nam Gun-hoon had just emerged victorious in his own match. Observing Hargan and YuWon's battle, he marveled at Hargan's strength, feeling a sense of rivalry with him. Despite YuWon's past victories against rankers, Nam Gun-hoon began to doubt whether she could overcome Hargan's formidable power. On the arena floor, a fierce battle unfolded between equals, Hargan continuously leveraging his agility advantage to launch rapid attacks at YuWon. YuWon even found himself pushed back by Hargan's onslaught despite his reluctance. He had to admit that Hargan's speed had been elevated to a new level. Undeterred, Hargan kept pressing forward towards YuWon. YuWon hurriedly extended his hands forward, immediately using them to block Hargan's advance, just as he had done in their first encounter. The arena continued to bear the brunt of the fury from both YuWon and Hargan's attacks. Cracks appeared on the sword in YuWon's hand, acknowledging Hargan's considerable strength. Hargan glanced at YuWon's sword and remarked, "Seems like that stick of yours is about to break. You'll be fine, won't you?" While Hargan was self-satisfied, addressing YuWon, "Is that all you've got? What have you been doing all this time?" Before he could finish his sentence, blood gushed from YuWon's arm, catching Hargan off guard. Observing YuWon's calm demeanor despite receiving a thunderous blow, Hargan couldn't help but acknowledge YuWon's physical prowess. Yet, Hargan, with his inherent belief in his inherited power, remained confident that he could surpass YuWon. Stepping forward, He knew it was time for them to continue their duel. YuWon always stood ready, waiting. Hargan continued his assault, charging towards YuWon. He aimed to target YuWon's weapon and shatter it. With each blow, Hargan exerted more force on the sword, causing the cracks to multiply until it finally shattered under the force of Hargan's fist. A victorious smile graced Hargan's lips as he finally achieved his goal, albeit briefly. However, YuWon responded to Hargan's triumph with a rather impressive statement. The expression on Hargan's face suddenly turned into confusion. Shouldn't he be the one in the dominant position? Why was YuWon speaking so casually? Suddenly, the atmosphere was engulfed in mana, causing Hargan's movements to freeze. YuWon's mana pushed back against Hargan's electrical surge. A punch from YuWon's hand landed straight on Hargan's face, catching him off guard. By the time Hargan realized it, it was too late. He was knocked down flat on the ground by YuWon. Now, only YuWon remained standing on the arena floor. The system broadcasted to everyone in the martial arts world that the winner of the martial arts tournament belonged to Kim YuWon. YuWon looked at the sword that Hargan had just destroyed, feeling a sense of regret. It was a good sword for mana control practice, but now it was broken. YuWon remembered Vulcaro's words, realizing that he had fulfilled YuWon's request to make the mana-conducting ability of the sword on his hand as bad as possible. YuWon glanced at Hargan lying unconscious on the arena floor, knowing that due to the suppression of his inherited power, his skills would appear to be on par with Hargan's. In YuWon's eyes, putting on a show wasn't enough to fool the rankers. It might deceive them for a while, but he still worried about the final blow to defeat Hargan. Just as the wooden MC appeared, it announced to everyone in the martial world that the winner of the 834th martial arts tournament was Kim YuWon. Then it wanted to interview YuWon for a few questions, asking how it felt to win. YuWon casually responded to the wooden figure, saying it felt good with just 2 words. Afterwards, the wooden figure took out a pill. It continued, saying, "Now, I will begin to award the prize. As everyone knows, the prize is the Xik De Dan Duok. According to the trainer, it is a special elixir with extraordinary effects." YuWon accepted the pill. The goal of obtaining the Xik Dan Duok had finally been achieved. Continuing on, YuWon would proceed according to his plan. He would continue to ascend the tower to the 20th floor. The result of the martial arts tournament was quickly announced before all the sect leaders. Zhuge Jinqian, the head of the sect, could not hide his resentment on his face. He wondered why Hargan would side with YuWon. Wasn't he Zeus's son, YuWon's enemy? Why were the people here changing their attitudes as soon as they learned YuWon had won? They began to praise him endlessly, even considering YuWon to be the martial world's lucky charm. Mujin looked at their expressions with disdain. Not long ago, they were sneering at Thiamafangio to his face, but now they were calling the vice-sect leader of Thiamafangio the martial world's lucky charm. Mujin couldn't hold back his anger. He stood up, loudly asking Jinwoon Namgum Jinwoon, "Why did you lure Thiamafangio here?" Mujin remained calm, despite Jinqian's agitation. He reminded Jinqian not to call Thiamafangio by the name Demon Sect. He also said that he didn't lure Thiamafangio here, but extended a formal invitation to Thiamafangio, inviting them to become allies of the martial world. Jinqian became even more agitated, wondering how the martial world alliance could become allies with the demon sect. Jinwoon immediately cut Jinqian off, stating that at least his decision would be better. He invited Olympus to join Jinqian. A surge of air emanated from Jinqian, as he emphasized each word of the martial world's issues, stating that they should only be settled by those within the martial world. Jinqian wondered why Jinwoon had said those words, and if there was some hidden meaning behind them, and why it was related to Olympus. Jinwoon warned Jinqian to be ashamed, and Jinqian's angry expression vanished. Jinwoon then knew everything, but Jinqian couldn't understand why Jinwoon remained silent until now. Was it because he was afraid of confronting Jinwoon's main sect, and now that Thiamafangio had joined his side, Jinwoon could control the power and begin to counterattack? Everyone present, from their respectful attitudes towards Jinwoon due to a single statement, to the looks of animosity towards Jinqian, who they had trusted, all because Jin Woon wanted to offer the martial world to Olympus. Mu Jin suddenly spoke up, disrupting the tense atmosphere, wanting to ask them one more question. Who is the person named Moon Sobark? All eyes moved towards Sobark, who was standing there. A few days later, at the training grounds of Namgungjia, YuWon stepped inside the cave entrance. As he entered, he looked around, knowing that renting this place for 10 days would likely cost him a huge amount of points. However, as the winner of the martial arts tournament, YuWon had the right to use the cave for training. YuWon remembered his past life, the first time he set foot in the dream tower of his clan, Nangunghun. That was also why he felt this place seemed so vast before, but now it appeared tiny. YuWon sat down in the middle of the cave, taking out the grand pink elixir he had obtained from the warehouse. His inherited power had now reached 99 points. Although there was only one more point to reach the triple digits, YuWon knew that obtaining this last point would be extremely difficult. In YuWon's memory, he had heard about this in his past life. Depending on the user, the effects of the grand pink elixir would vary greatly. In the martial world, they often talked about ki flow and breathing techniques, but the most important thing was focus. Perhaps how much mana YuWon could contain would be the issue. YuWon hastily swallowed the elixir pill. He could gradually sense the high-level pure mana overflowing within his body. However, because of this pure mana source, he could also sense a strange energy source. Moreover, thanks to his masterful mana skills, this strange energy source seemed to obey him. But for YuWon, even with this, it wasn't enough. Each drop of sweat from YuWon continuously dripped down his face. If this continued, YuWon might fail. His inherited power was slowly changing. At the same time, on the 20th floor of the tower, one of the 12 islands of Portugeneptu, the cries for mercy of two children echoed incessantly. The crowd detaining the two children not only showed no compassion, but also insulted them loudly for crying so much, saying things like, "Are you guys Hargan or something?" They were not even 10 years old yet, but were over 4 meters tall. The damn giants. After the ruthless insults towards the two children, they demanded that the two children reveal the legend of Portugia, the ocean stone. There was a tempting legend lying deep beneath Portugia. Whoever found the ocean stone would become the god of the ocean. The two giant children hastily denied it, saying it was just a baseless rumor. They knew nothing. Horlang, a member of the Xiklang Guild, stepped forward. He gently drew his sword in front of the two children, trying patiently to talk to them. Of course, we don't believe it much either, but we've also heard a fairly reliable rumor about giants hiding the ocean stone somewhere. This is a rumor from Olympus, so it's somewhat credible. The boy, although extremely frightened, still stood in front, protecting the girl. He shouted loudly, "You know our relationship with Olympus." But Horlang immediately interrupted the boy. He knew the relationship the boy was referring to, but if he could get an answer from the giants, it would be lucky for him. If not, killing the giants wouldn't be a big deal. Furthermore, the 20th floor was under Olympus's jurisdiction, so no one would care if 1 or 2 giants died. After finishing the vile words to the two children, he pointed his sword directly at the boy's body, threatening him. If he wanted to keep his life, he should quickly reveal the truth. Otherwise, he wouldn't hesitate to be ruthless with the children. A strange voice suddenly echoed in broad daylight. Who dares to do such a vile act? YuWon slowly revealed himself before them. Horlang caught a glimpse of the fluttering red cloak and guessed who the owner of that voice was. At that moment, YuWon activated his tracking skill, increasing his sensory perception from 10% to 25%. YuWon recalled the sensation in the training cave, where he saw a massive amount of mana flowing at an incredible speed. He couldn't slow down that mana flow, but it seemed like the mana wanted to belong to him. After struggling with the immense mana flow, YuWon's inherited power increased by 1 point. All of YuWon's efforts had paid off, as he had reached a power level of 100. An innate skill had awakened due to reaching a certain milestone, increasing his sensory perception to 50%. YuWon slowly approached them, activating his combat sensory skill. With this skill, he could gather information about all kinds of objects and living creatures within a 50-meter radius. YuWon drew his sword. If they thought YuWon was playing the hero, he would show them what real power was. It wasn't just a game. The crowd immediately felt YuWon's strength, even though the official match hadn't started yet. Horlang hurriedly stepped forward to intervene. He felt a hint of familiarity when he saw YuWon's face. Memories rushed back. He remembered who was standing before him. His mouth lifted slightly. I didn't expect to meet the deputy head of TMFNGO here. The two giant brothers, Bor and Engia, were also surprised by YuWon's appearance. When their subordinates wanted to attack, Horlang quickly stepped forward to stop them, suggesting that perhaps the soldiers of the devil were waiting to ambush them. Before leaving, he left a disdainful remark, "Dan giants, consider yourselves lucky." Horlang's face suddenly became sinister. He knew that Kim YuWon was always a thorn in Olympus's side. This was also an opportunity for him to score points with Hargan. In his mind, he just wanted to reach the headquarters quickly. After Horlang left, the two giant brothers, Bor and Engia, quickly bowed their heads to thank YuWon. YuWon turned back to look at the two children. The boy asked them curiously why, even though they were small, the two giants could easily defeat humans, why they didn't fight back. Bor lowered his head and hesitated. Perhaps YuWon didn't know much about giants, so he said that. The boy hesitantly asked YuWon which side he belonged to, Olympus or Asgard. Engia stepped forward to remind Bor not to be too wary of YuWon. They owed him. In Bor's eyes, YuWon was still human. He still doubted YuWon's help. YuWon not only did not deny it, but also admitted that Bor's words were correct. Bor became more excited and said to YuWon, knowing that YuWon was also looking for the ocean crystal, right? You're indeed a kindred spirit. Why doesn't anyone believe us? We know nothing. Why are we being turned into villains just because of a few rumors? Faced with Bor's excitement, YuWon gently explained to him that he knew the two giants didn't possess the ocean crystal. He just had a different purpose from the giants. The name Sofa slipped from YuWon's mouth, astonishing the two brothers. How did YuWon know the name of the elder? YuWon's purpose was simply to meet the elder of the giant tribe. After hearing YuWon's request, Bor became even more agitated. If he had enough strength, he would have rushed over to grab YuWon's face. He gritted his teeth and spoke to YuWon. The patriarch doesn't always get what he wants, especially not from someone like you. He loudly demanded YuWon to leave quickly, starting to threaten him. Bor boasted that he could easily crush people like YuWon. YuWon observed Bor's current angry demeanor, along with the attitude of wanting to punch someone displayed by the young boy. He knew that the giants were not weak at all. Since birth, they had carried extraordinary strength within them. Despite being able to fight fiercely, they deliberately restrained their power because they understood that conflicts with humans could lead to the destruction of their race once again. In YuWon's eyes, the boy in front of him looked very small but exuded a surprising wisdom. Bor pulled his younger sister Engia's hand, demanding that she leave. However, Engia told Bor to wait a moment and mentioned something about an egg in her hand. YuWon, curious, asked Engia if she had contacted the patriarch. Engia admitted to Bor that she had indeed contacted the patriarch because YuWon had saved them. Therefore, she thought they should at least relay a message to YuWon. Bor handed the egg to YuWon and told him that it was no longer an issue. They could decide later whether they wanted to or not, but the two siblings still had to take YuWon to meet their patriarch. Bor's attitude remained cautious, asking YuWon what he thought. YuWon couldn't understand why their patriarch wanted to meet him. Engia, seemingly indifferent to her brother's words, had only one question. She wondered how YuWon could make these big wolves listen to Bor's unpleasant orders. Remembering the moment when YuWon stared down the wolves, every wolf that didn't listen to him was kicked away. Engia kept praising YuWon to Bor, suggesting that he was not an ordinary person. She had heard that he also participated in the martial arts championship. Each time Engia praised YuWon, Bor immediately showed a restrained attitude towards him. In Bor's eyes, even if YuWon was a ranker, he didn't like him at all and was extremely suspicious of YuWon being acquainted with their patriarch. After some time trekking through the forest and crossing streams, the two siblings, Bor and Engia, brought YuWon to their village. They stood before the atom giant tree. Bor told YuWon that this tree would never burn or fall. Legend had it that each branch of the tree was a world. But so far, Boar didn't know if it was true or not. Emotions surged within YuWon. A tree that everyone thought would never burn or fall had turned into ash in the genocide against the giants before he returned. Boar looked up at YuWon and demanded that he quickly jump down. As YuWon leaped down, Boar reminded him to be careful with his actions if he didn't want to be attacked. The two siblings led YuWon into the village. Everyone in the village couldn't hide their astonishment upon seeing YuWon. All eyes were on YuWon and the two siblings. They began whispering to each other. Enjia worried that YuWon might feel hurt by their words and quickly turned to reassure him not to care about them. She reminded him that he was a guest of the patriarch and not to be afraid, as the two giants led YuWon to a house. The chief hesitated and asked if he was inside. The door slowly opened and the chief, Urfa, was inside, instructing them to come in. YuWon slowly stepped forward, finally able to meet him. The high ranker from before the giant extinction era. The living monument of the giants' tribe, the chief Kunhan Urfa. Urfa sat on the high seat and began to speak. YuWon warmly welcomed him. Urfa had heard a lot about YuWon from Hephaestus. Urfa directly asked YuWon if he was confronting Olympus. Facing Olympus as a non-ranker and only reaching level 20 like you is quite remarkable. Urfa kindly reminded YuWon that what he was doing was not courage but recklessness. If YuWon wanted to preserve his life, he shouldn't mess with them because in the eyes of the Olympus, YuWon was just an easily disposable pawn. Urfa cared about YuWon, and he was very appreciative, but YuWon had his own path. Due to Urfa's words, YuWon began to suspect whether Urfa was a peace advocate or just afraid. YuWon's aggressive attitude made Urfa unable to remain calm. He stomped his foot, and an aura immediately rose and merged into the air. YuWon anchored his feet to the ground to prevent himself from being pushed out of the room. He continued to speak to Urfa. He could tell Urfa knew about this already. Olympus was preparing for war with the Kunhan tribe. It had come to this point, yet Urfa still intended to sit still and let his tribe be wiped out. Why? Urfa looked into YuWon's eyes and saw no fear. Instead, there was determination. Furthermore, Urfa's mana did not want to harm YuWon. Urfa admitted that what YuWon said was correct. If things continued like this, his tribe would collapse. It was just a matter of time. As he caressed the wolf beside him, Urfa mentioned that he had heard from Hephaestus that YuWon was searching for the legendary sea stone. But it's not like what people say. We don't possess them. However, we know where they are. YuWon was extremely surprised. He didn't understand why Urfa was telling him all this. In Urfa's mind, there were two reasons for telling YuWon about the sea stone. First, according to Hephaestus, YuWon wasn't on Olympus' side. Second, because Kim YuWon left Urfa's house. As he walked, YuWon looked at his glove and wondered why Urfa had looked at it earlier. He remembered the second reason Urfa had revealed the sea stone's information to him, because he was the strongest player of this era. Despite Vulcaro's praise, Urfa would never assess YuWon so easily, or maybe Urfa was just testing to see if YuWon was worthy of the sea stone. YuWon continued to move forward. No matter the reason, he would quickly find their location. YuWon ran to the giant tree of the Kunhan tribe. Its size reminded him of the staff of Tongokong. With his current level, it would be difficult to destroy it, which also meant he could go berserk at any moment. YuWon glanced at Thanho hovering around him. If this situation continued, he feared that even he wouldn't be able to control Thanho, and it might erupt randomly. Given the circumstances, YuWon decided to use his light-sensitive eyes to see through everything. With this skill, he could search for information about all objects and creatures within a 50-meter radius, increasing his perception by 50%. YuWon focused on the Thanho stones ahead. As Thanho simultaneously fell onto the giant tree, YuWon gritted his teeth. Perhaps he had used too many high-level skills at once, which made his head dizzy. YuWon hastily retreated to his previous position. Thanho slammed into the giant tree, causing a seismic shock. YuWon almost succeeded. Although he failed, the combination of heightened combat senses and light-sensitive eyes allowed him to see the world in an unbelievable way, almost like in his imagination. The synergy of these two skills was truly remarkable. The only issue YuWon faced was that the wider his senses expanded, the heavier his brain became. He reminded himself to train more. At that moment, the young giants approached. When Buar saw YuWon sitting there, he was visibly displeased. Buar stepped in front of him, still skeptical of YuWon's power. The other young giants hurriedly advised Buar to stop, saying YuWon was called by Elder Urfa, and everyone had already seen him and taken him there. But Buar, regardless of the advice, still saw humans as the enemy of the Kunhan tribe. Meanwhile, Urfa remained silent in his room, with memories of past battles still deeply ingrained in his mind. Suddenly, he heard a commotion outside about a battle between the young giants and Kim YuWon. Another thought came to Urfa's mind this time. Things wouldn't go as YuWon intended. Poseidon, the sea god, along with Nyr, driven by their hatred for humans, had actively attacked YuWon but were easily restrained by him. YuWon's smile only fueled Nyr's anger. As YuWon challenged them to call all their comrades, the challenge quickly spread throughout the village. Buar couldn't help but be amazed at YuWon's strength. They couldn't believe that someone like YuWon could defeat an entire village of giants. As the giants charged at YuWon, he effortlessly knocked them down to the ground one by one. Not only that, YuWon activated his Kunhanho skill, making his arm no different from that of a giant. Muscles bulged as YuWon reminded them not to come at him one by one but to attack together. From within the crowd, the two siblings, Buar and Njia, slowly emerged. The villagers immediately cheered, astonished to see them here too. It was unbelievable. They were witnessing the descendants of the giant deity fighting. This was also the first time YuWon had heard of the descendants of the giant deity. He sensed that these two children were stronger than him, far beyond what he had imagined. Buar eagerly spoke to YuWon, expressing his itching anticipation since their first encounter. He wanted to see just how powerful Kim YuWon truly was. Unable to refuse Buar's enthusiasm, YuWon accepted the challenge. Buar charged forward, and YuWon activated his skill of foresight. He read the information from Buar's arm, gracefully dodging Buar's punch and countering with a direct blow to the ground. YuWon continued to defend against Buar's relentless attacks. However, all of Buar's movements surpassed YuWon's predictions, even faster than he had anticipated. Buar suddenly shouted and charged at YuWon from behind. YuWon quickly shifted his position, using his sword to block Njia's fist. Despite his efforts, YuWon was still pushed back by Njia's force. YuWon was extremely disoriented. These two siblings were indeed much stronger than he had thought. It seemed impossible to defeat them without using mana. YuWon reassessed the situation. After all, this was just training. He decided to only use the skills he had practiced. YuWon continued to advance while Buar kept attacking. The young boy asked YuWon why he never spoke lightly or heavily like his younger sister. There was only one answer. Njia was stronger than Buar. Together, the siblings complemented each other. One attacked YuWon from the front, while the other tried from behind. Both landed punches on YuWon's body, unintentionally causing an explosion that shattered the ground. However, when the smoke cleared, YuWon was nowhere to be seen. At that moment, YuWon was hovering in the air, 2 meters away from his previous position, thanks to a skill he had trained with the equipment he purchased on the 11th floor. This skill allowed him to walk on air. YuWon suddenly appeared in front of the siblings. With a gentle stroke of his sword on Njia's shoulder, Buar became extremely agitated. He saw YuWon as cunning. Buar quickly ordered his sister to continue attacking. With his skill, YuWon continuously dodged the attacks of the siblings, moving unpredictably. Both Buar and Njia were getting tired. Njia asked Buar if he thought YuWon knew their attacks in advance. Buar admitted that since YuWon didn't counterattack, he couldn't predict what YuWon wanted to do, but he wouldn't let YuWon have his way anymore. Buar slowly stood up, his mana emanating from within. Njia was horrified, reminding Buar that they would be punished if they used mana like this. YuWon found it strange. Buar wasn't even a ranker, yet he was being punished for using mana. YuWon continued to use his foresight, determined to anticipate Buar's next move. When Buar's hand almost touched his face, YuWon saw its vulnerability and swiftly dodged.